What? Sorry, hold on.
Oh, also, there is only one after. Oh, yeah, you told me there was only one after credit scene. Yeah.
Yeah. So, by the way, that's on recording. I accidentally started recording, but I got to type in the intro real quick first. So.
No, that's cool. Dude, Vegas Knights, man, just hammering down on the Sharks. That was unexpected.
7. I saw that game, 2 periods of it. Just, I don't know. They just look really, really quick. Their speed is just unbelievable.
They are an all-star team that has had all year to practice, and there it shows.
I guess so. And they're not cracking, at least not yet. Anyways, we'll see when they get to San Jose.
Yeah.
Infinity War. This is Venom.
You see, they're remaking The Grudge.
Just can't leave anything alone, man. Whether it was good or whether it's bad, just can't leave anything alone.
Yeah, for sure. The first one actually gave me nightmares when I was a kid.
I remember it. I wasn't a kid. Okay, there we go. On our latest episode, we have a spoiler-free review of Avengers Infinity War. Does Venom still have some sting? And has Westworld achieved Game of Thrones status? All this and more as we reach our next stop, the PCC Multiverse. And we are back once again with the PCC Multiverse. This is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. We truly thank you for tuning back in to another great episode that we have for you today. And it wouldn't be a PCC Multiverse without my good friend. He is the man, the myth, the legend behind Humanica Media. You gotta check out all the great stuff that's going on there at humanicamedia.com, or their YouTube channel, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or their dozens of podcast channels. It's my good friend. It's the man who actually saw Avengers Infinity War. It's Josh Peterson. How'd that indie flick go, man?
That was very good. It's just a small
Wait,
boat.
That's for the back end, my friend. You gotta wait for that one.
Up for that question.
I know. That's the kind of little put in that little surprise value there. But we are going to definitely talk about Avengers Infinity War. Josh will be breaking it down on the back half. We're devoting the entire back half of the episode to Avengers Infinity War, a spoiler-free review with Josh's thoughts on the movie itself. But first, we're going to be talking about Venom, Westworld, and also Rob McCallum and Jay Bartlett stopped by to talk Solo and their great Star Wars project, a Star Wars related project, Galaxy of Hope, which you can support right now on Kickstarter. Just got to go right now to Kickstarter and type in Galaxy of Hope, and I tell you what, it's a great project. Basically going to be able to get a whole bunch of Star Wars collectibles out there. They're going to shoot for going ahead and going anywhere and everywhere seemingly to go ahead and get those great Star Wars collectibles, and then go ahead and auction off to a great charity as well. You'll find out a little bit more about that, but also as well, you're going to find out a little bit some of the reasons why that they're doing it. And if you want to go ahead and check out a further detailed thoughts from both of them, we have a special Pop Culture Cosmos episode that just launched the other day right on our Pop Culture Cosmos channels on over 30 different podcast networks. Josh, first though, I know you got the chance to see Venom, the new trailer that came out for the movie that's upcoming by Sony that's dealing in the Spider-Verse and all that. Share me your thoughts on Venom because my goodness, I've got some thoughts that I really want to lay into when it comes to Venom, the movie. But you first, my friend.
I'm not excited. I wasn't excited during the first trailer, and I'm not excited during this one. And I'm torn. Like, I don't seeing the whole thing come together did not like with the teeth and all that and the tongue and all that. It doesn't look the way that I had expected it to look. In the comic books they do Agent Venom, and he has he has his black suit and he has like a black Spider-Man suit and he's got like Punisher gear. That's cool. That would translate well into a real life scenario, but this is like the 1990s cartoon Venom, and I'm not a huge fan. And it's not even that. It's also the fact that like it looks completely over the top. Like I don't know what they're trying to do. Like it looks very like gimmicky. Like he's the part with the motorcycle and he shoots the thing out of his chest and pulls the motorcycle back to him. Like that's like the transporter. It looks like this is going to be the transporter of comic book movies. And then that whole thing in the beginning where they have to say in association with Marvel films, like what does that mean? Because if Tom Holland's gonna have a cameo in this film, where does this stand? And it honestly looks like they're gonna do an even worse job with this movie than they did with the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. And I actually liked the Amazing Spider-Man franchise. So I don't know, man. I'm not excited. It doesn't look like that great of a movie. And I know a lot of people are excited about it, but I think they're gonna go to the theaters, in October and find disappointment.
I know I would if I'm going to go see it, but right now I'm not enthused at all in seeing it. In the few scenes that I saw him as a reporter, he looked totally that him being Tom Hardy, who's playing the lead character in this movie, totally looked unbelievable as far as that role, as far as and the intrepid reporter, so to speak, as far as the investigative reporter and all that. It looked totally staged, totally fake, and I just really just am disappointed so far from what I've seen. And then the special effects, eh, I just wasn't really impressed by it either. And when it finally came up to the CGI of becoming the full blown Venom outfit and whatnot, well, I'll just say if you search out Elizabeth Banks and her Twitter account, I think that probably says it best. But it's unfortunately NSFW, so I don't really want to comment any further on that, other than saying it was just not the best CGI in the world. So I'm not exactly really enthused by it. This could be a huge misfire for Sony and the Spider-Verse as far as them trying to go ahead and expand the Spider-Man universe. This could be a serious misstep. I just think it comes down to Tom Hardy being miscast in this type of role. What are your thoughts on Tom Hardy so far? Because I'm really not impressed from what I saw.
I think they're trying to get him to play something outside of his depth. Eddie Brock is a very shallow character. There's not any layers to him. He's a reporter, and then he's got anger issues, and that's it. There's nothing really, tragic about him. Uh, there's some stuff in the comic books, he has to fight his girlfriend and stuff like that, but there's no like backstory that makes him interesting. He doesn't have a tragedy behind him. There's nothing like that, and it just Tom Hardy has far too many acting chops. He's far too good at acting to be portraying a part like this. If they were to give him more depth, make him like a more, I don't want to say Bane like, but give him, don't the whole Brooklyn accent, it doesn't work. I don't believe it. And I don't know, man. Like I love Tom Hardy, but I don't think that this role's for him. But like even more so than Tom Hardy is the guy that plays the villain. Like he sounds like a spoiled child. He's not intimidating. He just sounds like a high school kid who's out there spending his dad's money. And that's that the villain is just not scary to me either. So I don't know, man.
Well, it's supposed to be the anti-hero, and that flashes on the screen when you're watching the trailer, but to me it's like the anti superhero movie, and it's just it's not about heroes and villains in this case. It's just the shades of gray. And we've seen movies that have delicately balanced that line and done it very well with morally gray heroes and villains and whatnot, basically bordering the line, and but still being able to pull off a great comic book or superhero adaptation. In this case, it just seems like there's nothing interesting about any of these characters, and they just look and all of them, not just Tom Hardy, looks like their character is very angry in it, and it's every single character does not have a fulfilling purpose in the movie, and they all seem to have anger issues. Then really, there's just nowhere for the audience to go or to sympathize with or to really get behind or root behind when it comes to a main character, supporting character, what have you. So I just really don't think at this point in time I see much that impresses me when it comes to Venom. And that's going to be a disappointment for Sony, which goes right back to where it started again after the success of Spider-Man Homecoming. If
Right.
it if that's was you as far as running Sony and whatnot, what are you feeling at this point, or what do you think in this point that you may need to alter, tweak, or change in order to try and get the Spider Verse going, to keep on going strong instead of maybe possibly seeing a derailment later this year when Venom comes out?
Well, to get the Spider-Verse going, you need a Spider-Man. So Sony needs to just work with Marvel. I know they got this contract going for Spider-Man in the MCU, but they need to work with Marvel. They need to hammer out a fluent future for the character. And this is what I've always said. If you use Carnage, you'd have to have it would be a very dark movie. You'd have to have an R rating, but it would make so much money. It would just make a disgusting amount of money because Carnage is the holy grail of Spider-Man villains. And that's the one that everybody wants to see. Growing up, every kid wanted to see Carnage in the comic books, in the cartoons, whatever it was. People wanted to see Carnage, and it's just there's that's something big like that could potentially create interest in a Spider Verse separate of.
What about Miles Morales? What if he made an entry instead of what we've seen from Tom Holland's Spider-Man character?
It would be very, I don't know. It seems like there'd be too much going on at once. I think the MCU would need to introduce a Miles Morales Spider-Man because he's a little like less tragic than Peter Parker is. Like Peter Parker can exist in a dark Spider-Man universe, but I don't think Miles Morales could. Miles Morales is like he's sad, but he doesn't have the tragedies that Peter Parker that makes Peter Parker such an interesting character.
It looks like that's going to be the case, that they're going to have to throw something in there, though, that's going to make Venom more interesting. Because right now, what they have is not a whole lot. And like you said, if Carnage isn't going to be a part of this film, then from all aspects, it doesn't look like this is going to be a winner at this point. Although things can change, and hopefully they'll show themselves better in the coming months. Because, like you said, it's coming out in October, and not a lot of people are going to be excited for it if you're going off of these first two trailers. What are your thoughts on Venom? Are you excited for it, or are you not so like us? Share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos at yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanica Media, and Game Source on Facebook and Twitter as well. Josh, I also wanted to touch on real quick, Westworld is back up and running on HBO. It actually garnered a lot of attention as the #2 show behind Game of Thrones. I want to ask you real quick your thoughts on Westworld, and do you think it can capture, or has it already captured, the attention and magic that of people's attention now that Game of Thrones is on a extended hiatus?
I still gotta watch the show. Like I've heard great things about it. I haven't had a chance to watch any of it yet, but it's something I want to watch on a day where I can just watch them all. And, it's based on the Michael Crichton books, but yeah, it looks good, man. Like it has the drama, it has the appeal, it has all the things that made me want to go watch Game of Thrones after seeing the trailers. And I'm I mean, yeah, like it's something that it's still fresh, it's still new, people still like it, and so it could be what carries what carries on after Game of Thrones ends. Have you seen any of it?
I have seen it. I am caught up to date with it. I have seen the first episode from this season, and I did see the entire season last year. It is at this point in time pretty good, off to a pretty good start as far as what I've seen so far. Obviously, leading from the events from last year, and I won't spoil it for you if you're going to go ahead and binge it. I will tell you, for me though, that first season was very uneven. There were some really good performances and really good episodes, and there were some that were just that they just dragged and just basically could not really keep up with the excellent episodes that were there. So for me, it was a little bit uneven, but it ended pretty good for me as far as that's concerned. And it actually, on this note, on this season, started okay with trying to go ahead and unravel exactly the carnage and what exactly happened, and trying to trace back what happened the past few days before, since the ending of season 1. So it's trying to unravel a mystery at this point in time, which is kind of cool and whatnot, but it's still all about the androids versus the humans, and that's what it ultimately breaks down to. So seeing that from that perspective is still kind of interesting to me, and seeing how these stories develop out in this, well, glorified version of a theme park, as far as that's concerned, still actually has some very good moments, and I do give it a passing grade. Like I said, it is very uneven for me in the first season, but there are still some good times as far as that's concerned. It hasn't achieved for me the excellence of Game of Thrones, because when Game of Thrones hits a high, I don't think Westworld quite reaches that as of yet. There is shock value in the Westworld. There is a lot of adult content. There is a lot of mature content. That's notwithstanding. It's an HBO series, of course, is going to do all that type of stuff. But I will say it doesn't quite match up yet to Game of Thrones, but that's not saying it won't down the line. So I will continue to watch the series as well, and make sure, and see if it does match up to what Game of Thrones has to offer, or what Game of Thrones has offered fans all across the world for so many years already, and will only do so for a limited time run. One last question on Westworld, my friend. Do you think that Westworld, as far as a series, if you do get into it, you binge it and you like it, do you think it can retain that cult following from Game of Thrones, or do you think that it's going to create its own unique audience that's not going to be, for instance, let's say it's going to go from a Coke, it's just have Coke fans instead of having trying to get people over from Pepsi, and keep those two separate, as far as Game of Thrones fans being separate from Westworld fans?
I think it's gonna do a bit of both. I think Game of Thrones fans, at least the ones I've talked to, all like Westworld, and there's also people who aren't fans of the epic fantasy genre. So there might be more into Westworld because they might be into like westerns and stuff, like western sci-fi, whatever you want. Um yeah, no, man, like it has potential, and like, you're talking about the season getting off to a rocky start. The Game of Thrones kind of did that too. And if you remember, Game of Thrones didn't actually really get that popular until the second or third season, and that's when it really started to build the momentum that thrust it into the limelight that it's in today. And HBO is smart in the fact that their big properties, a lot of them are based off of books written by people, and it just goes to show you that books are the best materials for adaptation. But on the plus side, hopefully this will get people to start reading books. That would be cool. But yeah, no, man, I think it has the potential there. There's definitely, like, it's gonna have its unique audience. It's kind of like uh it's kind of dark towery in a way. So there's fans of that type of genre are definitely going to be flocking to it. And I'm sure the better it does, and the longer that it's on, it's going to continue to do well. But what's good about HBO shows is that they have a beginning and they have an end. It's not like a Supernatural. It's going to drag on for 17 seasons. So that's always good with that.
By the way, HBO is online too for you. They're asking if they can go ahead and adapt Vendetta Dark as the next series after Westworld is done?
They're gonna have to talk to my lawyers about that. Actually, I would probably say yes if someone
You
wanted.
would say yes in a heartbeat. Okay, they couldn't get the words out of their mouth before you would say yes, yes, yes. You would go in Daniel Bryan mode right there for you.
Vendetta Dark, yes,
Yes,
into a children's book. Oh.
yes. As long as the check comes, correct?
As long as my bills get paid.
There you go. There you go. Spoken like a true author. What are your thoughts on Westworld? Are you really enthused about the series? Are you back for season 2? Or is it something you haven't gotten in yet? Is it matching your expectations? Or do you think it's something that's not quite yet in that Game of Thrones threshold that that so many people love so much? Threshold that so many people love so much. Share us your thoughts, Pop Culture Cosmos. PopCultureCosmos at yahoo.com, also as well, Humanica Media, Game Source, and Pop Culture Cosmos on Facebook and Twitter as well. Josh, before we head on over after the break to go ask, before we head on over to the next, before we head on over to talk to Jay and Rob after the break, fill us in on what's going on with your great site known as Humanica Media.
Oh, just so much, Gerald Glassford. Thank you for asking. Yeah, man, there's a new top. We actually all 3 of our Marvel phase reviews are up there, so you can check that out on Topicocalypse. And Super BS just dropped a Tides of Numenera episode. So if you're a fan of the holiday episode of Super BS, we jump back into the world of Numenera to play a campaign created by Eric. So if you're into that, if you like Dungeons and Dragon type podcasts, that's definitely something you might want to check out. And then Charles is pumping content out like crazy on the Inside Sports podcast. I don't know if you've been seeing that come out. It's making a lot of editing time for me, but definitely check that out. There's stuff for hockey fans, stuff for football fans, and I'm sure there's stuff for fans of people who like to listen to other people talk about things.
That's again, check out everything you see there at humanicamedia.com. Also, as well, all those shows, Inside Sports, What About This, Super BS Gamescast, and Topicocalypse on Podbean as well, and so many other different outlets. Like I said, coming up after the break, we've got Rob McCallum and Jay Bartlett talking to us about their great project, Galaxy Hope, which you can now help support on Kickstarter. And they're also going to talk a little bit about Solo upcoming as well. So definitely I want to hear their thoughts on both that and their upcoming project. This is the PCC Multiverse. Is Phase 3 clean?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't listen. It's clean. I didn't listen to the last like 10 minutes of it, but everything through that has been clean so far.
All right, I'll gamble with it. Fair enough. And we're back once again with the PCC Multiverse. This is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source. We truly appreciate you sticking around and enjoying the show. And we will leave you no further in suspense. We're dedicating this last half hour to Avengers Infinity War. Josh has seen it. I am on pins and needles, want to hearing his thoughts on it, and definitely want to know exactly if it's a good movie to watch, and also exactly some general parameters around it, because we're going to try and keep it as spoiler free as possible without ruining it for anyone out there, because we know this drops Friday originally to our podcast network. So definitely want to go ahead and make sure we try and keep it as spoiler free as possible. But we got to hear your thoughts, Josh, on it. So first off, go ahead and just give us some general thoughts, and then we'll go ahead and break it down a little bit more on Avengers Infinity War.
It was a good movie. It was everything that I thought it would be and more. And the Russos did a great job of throwing a lot of misdirect in. There's some stuff like in the trailers that everyone kept on like making assumptions about, and it was kind of like a red herring, because once you see it in the movie, you see that they did such a clever job with editing the trailer that none of the stuff that we're all guessing about seems to happen.
Well, let me ask you this. Is all the components of the trailer in the actual movie? Because you and I have both seen trailers where there's items put in the trailer that never end up making the movie.
It's like Rogue One when they're running on the beach with the plans or whatever. Yeah, no, there's some stuff. Do you want me to tell you what it is that's in the trailers that's not in the movie?
Is that a spoiler-filled thing, or do you think that's going to
No,
ruin it for people?
it won't ruin it, but it's just the when they show the scene in Wakanda, like not all of the people who are there in the trailer are there in the movie. So they are, but just not in that state. So just
The readiness state, is that what you're saying?
yeah, well yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But
Okay, that's not a spoiler. That's not a spoiler per se. We're just saying that it's not in there as far as generalities. So they're in a different format in the film. They're just not in that stance that you see them in the in that hovercraft thing as they're preparing for battle. So
right.
Okay, well that's not exactly a spoiler right
Well,
there.
I mean, okay, I'm just this tough. The when they show the Hulk running through the forest, he's not in Hulk form. So that's just one thing there. But
well, you like I said, okay, there are items basically in a nutshell. There are items that are in the trailers that are not that don't end up in the movie. So we obviously we know that most of it is in there. However, but
yeah,
overall, as far as you said, the movie, and they throw a lot of red herrings at you, and they throw a lot of diversions at you. Is there too many diversions, or does that become a problem as far as the movie is concerned, or is there anything, is it still entertaining? Because we've seen films that just keep constantly throwing surprises and diversions at us, and we just go ahead and basically just, after a while, just become numb to it. Does that happen at all?
no, not really. This is the one thing that I will give high praise to the movie for. I mean, there's a lot I'll give high praise to the movie for, but they did a good job of giving every character enough screen time without making it feel like they were rushing through it. And the movie literally picks up right after the events of Ragnarok. So you don't even, you don't have to worry about those gaps. And they even go out of their way to close certain story arcs from Ragnarok, from Civil War, from all the stuff that they left, all the stuff that they kind of left open in previous movies. They do a good job of revisiting it and closing it. And also they do, at the same time, they do a good job of moving forward. So the cast was huge. They had a lot, and they were all off doing different things. And there was some parts where like it would go from one planet to another planet, and you're like, oh, how is that happening? But it makes sense in the end. And there's this thing like, how is Thanos in all of these places at once? But he's Thanos. He can, he has ability to travel across the galaxy by snapping his fingers. So it's not like one of those things where it's like, oh, it bothers me. You know how like when directors do jump cuts and they go from like night to day. There's a couple things in it like that, but it makes sense though. It like maybe it'll pull you out for it doesn't it pulls you out of that moment, but it puts you right back into another moment that you're equally invested in. So it's it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing either. The dynamic between Thor, Rocket, and Groot is probably one of the greatest parts of the movie.
Really? Because I've heard it's either a love it or a not so love it thing, because maybe sometimes, well, that's just the overall thing of the film. I want to ask you this. You and I loved Blade Runner 2049. It was our pick of the year for the best film of 2017. Its main criticism was that its running time maybe was just about a little bit too long. In some cases, people thought it was really too long. This movie is a comparable time frame. In fact, 2 hours, 40 minutes running time, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So I ask you, is that a problem? Because I know one thing that was said by certain critics was that even though they enjoyed the Thor, Groot, Rocket triumvirate, there were some things about it, and I'm not going to say specifics exactly what they're going after, what they do, because there's only vague, generalistic things shown in the trailers as far as it's concerned. But them getting together at all, do they spend too much time on that, or do they really does it really click for you all the way?
No, it clicked for me. That sounds like a critic just needing to insult something, but no, honestly, no. Like it needed to happen, and there wasn't like any parts during those that gathering of cast that I'm sorry, man. There wasn't any part during, scenes where they were all together where it felt unnecessary, where I was like, "Oh, this doesn't need to be in there." It all made sense, and they did a good job of elaborating on like how Thor used to talk about where the weapons were made, and it showed like that's cool, and it shows like how the Infinity Gauntlet was made, who made it. Like that's all stuff that needed to be in there. You needed to see that for some of the things that took place in the film later on. You needed all that for the film to make sense. And there are some parts with with Iron Man and their team up with Doctor Strange and the other half of the Guardians that felt sort of like they dragged on a little bit. You have, characters like what's her name that does the little mind thing, Mantis. You have characters like Mantis who, beyond messing with people's minds, like she doesn't really do much. So they did a decent. They didn't have like suffer from X-Men problems, but like there was some stuff in there that like felt you're like, okay, well, even a person in that situation would probably not have done that. But there's not a lot in the film that feels unnecessary. It's a long movie, but if they were to make it any shorter, you wouldn't have the same outcome. It was just the right amount of time to tell the story that it needed to tell and give people uh the closure that they needed or the character arcs that they needed, a beginning and an end. It did that very well.
One of the things that's also mentioned because of the time frame involved is that some critics have out there saying it's kind of an exhausting film. Were you exhausted or totally spent as far as emotionally after seeing the film, or did it invigorate you even more for seeing the next installment next year when it comes out?
See, that's tough without getting into spoiler territory. No,
Just generals. Keep it general.
okay, it kept me interested, and there's a lot of things where they did play off of audience expectations, and they're like, "Oh, this is gonna happen," and then you're like, "Oh, no, that happened," and then like it ends up not being what you think it is. And then there's stuff that happens that you don't expect to happen, and you're just like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened." So there's a lot of emotions going on. I don't think it ran too long though. Like honestly, it was. I didn't look at my watch. I didn't wonder what time it was. I got out of the movie theater before 11 o'clock, and I'd call that a pretty decent flick. I don't know what the deal is with that, but yeah, I'll have to look at some of these reviews. But no, it didn't feel too long, didn't feel too short. It felt about the right time because that's kind of what Marvel movies have started to be over their evolution is 2 hours, sometimes barely under 3 hours.
The three main places that has been shown in the trailers are New York, Wakanda, and the outer space realm where the Guardians of the Galaxy and Thor meet up. Are these the only places that are focused on in the movie, or are there many more places that are involved? Like I said, just be generalistic as far as that's concerned.
Yeah, there's a lot of different planets. There's a lot of different locales. You have New York, and there's obviously you saw in the trailers you have Thanos's planet, and you get to see a little bit of Gamora's backstory and where she's from, and you get to see the place where the dwarves forged the weapons of Asgard. Yeah, there's you get to go places. You definitely get to go places, and it's like I said, that when they jump between all these different places. It's like there's those jump cuts, but then it's like when you how am I trying to describe this? Game of Thrones. When you read a Game of Thrones novel, every character has a story arc, and once the chapter's over, you go to another character, but then 3 or 4 chapters down the line, you jump back into that character's story arc. That's what it is, but except it's in movie form. So even when you lose, you're like, oh no, what happens to this character? You jump back into another character arc that you're equally invested in, and they do a good job of that. And they spend just enough time in each of these locales to basically make something cool happen.
Now, when it comes to as far as the relationships between some of the new characters, did you enjoy as far as all the new combinations that you ended up seeing on film, or was there any ones in particular that stood out that were kind of awkward and really just didn't go over very well? Or did it, as a individual who follows the comic book scene even still to this day, is it still something definitely as far as exciting when you saw all these different pair ups than even people who read comic books actually were used to seeing?
It wasn't as much, it wasn't cool, like, it was cool seeing them all together, but it wasn't as cool as seeing how they came together and how, like, I'm not gonna say anything, but just, like, how they just, like, freakishly run into each other and just the shenanigans that happens from that. One thing I will say is that I hate I love Winter Soldier, and they completely downplayed him in this movie, and that kinda irked me a little bit because he's basically Captain America, just with a metal arm. So that was one thing that did upset me, but, other than that, all the characters coming together and seeing them, like, team up with each other, it was cool. It was, there's some moments where, the obviously anything with Guardians of the Galaxy is gonna have a little awkwardness in it because they're just, they're dumb and they're kind of aware of the fact that a lot of them are dumb, and that's what makes them funny, but you kind of see like to see how some of the Avengers react to like the stupidity is pretty funny, but it at the same time you have to be ready for it because it creates there's like a lot of awkward silences, but they're there on purpose.
All right. That is so far. We've got a lot to talk about again, still with Josh Peterson. This is our spoiler free review of Avengers Infinity War. If you have questions for us on Avengers Infinity War that I can relate to Josh or myself or Tyler Baker, because we're going to be breaking down even more on our next week's shows with spoilers, both Josh on the Friday show, the PCC Multiverse, and Tyler Baker and I on the Pop Culture Cosmos next week. Check it out, definitely indeed. You can actually send us questions and we'll be glad to answer them as well. When we come back, we're going to be talking a lot more about Avengers Infinity War, his thoughts on the movie, and ultimately the question that I'm going to ask him at the end: is this the best Marvel movie of them all? This is the PCC Multiverse. And we're back to close out the show. This is once again the PCC Multiverse. This is Gerald Glasser from Pop Culture Cosmos and Game Source, along with my good friend from Humanica Media and fellow host Josh Peterson. Want to thank again Rob McCallum and Jay Bartlett for stopping by and talking about their great project, Galaxy of Hope, which you can go ahead and help contribute today on Kickstarter. You just go ahead and search out Galaxy of Hope. It's going to be a great project basing itself on an unofficial Star Wars documentary, basically how Jay can go ahead and collect as much as he can as far as Star Wars collectibles, and then go ahead and make sure and go ahead and auction them off to a great charity. Definitely want to go ahead and contribute to that today on Kickstarter so that they can go ahead and film that great effort by Jay upcoming, just as they did in their previous hit, Nintendo Quest. Also, as well, want to go ahead and thank you, the listener, again for making us the #1 and #2 shows on the podcast radio network in the month of March. Definitely appreciate you doing so. And thank you so much for everything that you do to support our shows on the PRN or our other 7 other radio stations and over 30 different podcast networks. Josh, continuing our talk as far as Avengers Infinity War, I got to ask you, my friend, you talked about the humor as far as in the past with Thor Ragnarok and some of the other films, sometimes getting in the way, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, sometimes getting in the way of really what needed to be done as far as from a narrative standpoint or from a just from a total understanding of what's going on in the film. Does the humor, which I'm pretty sure there's going to be plenty of in the film, which I'm sure you heard plenty of in the film, does that get in the way at all as far as the actual end goal and end game is concerned, as far as what they wanted to, what the Russos wanted to go ahead and correlate to audiences as far as the narrative is concerned?
No, because honestly, I will tell you this: the movie gets really dark, and the humor just is in there to kind of make it not feel like it's full of despair. And they use the humor sparingly, and they use it well. And it's the the type of thing, if you have personalities like that coming together, um, that's when the humor is used to kind of say like, oh, see how one group reacts to another, or um, obviously in the discussing of plans, like with Star Lord and Tony Stark. But there's also, you can tell they're kind of gearing up for Benedict Cumberbatch to take over like the leadership roles, because he kind of butts heads with Tony Stark a lot, and there's a little bit of comedy in there, and especially with like Spider-Man. So it's used sparingly, because the movie, I'll be completely honest, like this movie gets really dark really fast. So it's not on a scale of like broody dark like DC, but it is really dark. So the comedy is placed in, it's not overwhelming, and it's done just enough. Kind of it's just typical of what the Russos do. Winter Soldier and Captain America Civil War, they show Bucky and Falcon in the seat of the car. Can you move your seat up? No. It's just like little things like that to kind of keep the darkness at bay.
One of the things that you have correlated to me as far as what you wanted to see more of is what happens down the line as far as the future for some of the main and key individuals in the series. You talked about what the possibilities could be down the road for Doctor Strange and some of the other characters within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is Avengers Infinity War, as far as a film, a great stepping point for the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka Phase 4 and beyond, when Captain Marvel, possibly Doctor Strange 2, definitely Black Panther 2, and all those movies going forward come after it?
See, that's a tough one to answer without spoiling. It's not as much of a setting up point for the next phase as you think. It gives all the heroes their time to shine, but it doesn't do any highlighting about what the future is going to bring. And I'm sure Avengers 4 is going to do that. They'll close out the arc that started in this movie, but as far as like this one goes, it's a very closed off movie. Like, you have a starting point, you have a stopping point, and with the exception of the tease of whatever is about to come next, they do a good job of keeping it confined, and there's no foreshadowing to what's going to happen in the future, because it ends on it's such a crazy like roller coaster ride all the way up until the end. You can't really guess what's going to happen.
Now, is there as come a point of time, and again, I'm trying to speak in many generalities here, because again, this is our spoiler free review of Avengers Infinity War. But you said it does do a great job of closing off the previous installments. You said Captain America Civil War, and also what as well, that as far as what movies that Thor Ragnarok, and movies you said that needed closing off and needed some type of closure, that it did a good job of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a couple things that you'll leave the movie theater and you'll be like, oh wait, yeah, what happened to that person? But for the most part, they do a good job of closing. Like, you wonder like, what happened to the ship when it came across Thanos in the end of Ragnarok? They address that by starting the movie right there. And what's going on with the Sokovia Accords? They address that. The um early in the movie, so you don't have to like keep wondering about it. Then like Winter Soldier, they talk about what happened with that, and everyone was speculating about what he was going to become. They answered those questions. And then I'm trying to think what else is there. The dynamic between Vision and Scarlet Witch, that they started to hint at in was the Civil War, like that's also answered. There's a couple character arcs that I wanted to know more about, or like what happened to these characters, but I'm sure we'll see it in Avengers 4. So yeah, they did a good job of closing a lot of loose ends in this movie.
Now, as far as well, okay, that's for that point, that sounds good. I mean, for that sounds great as far as being able to close off the previous phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and because those are all Phase 3 films that you're talking about, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the case, then Phase 3 basically is going to end when it comes to this film. Is that correct, or does it end with the next installment as far as that's concerned?
I think phase 3 ends with Avengers 4 if I remember correctly.
Okay, fair enough. I just wanted to make sure, and so that includes Ant-Man and the Wasp, and also Captain Marvel coming up in 2019. So okay, so just wanted to make sure that Avengers Infinity War, again, we're trying to break it down as best we can with Josh Peterson without going too much into spoilers territory, because I haven't even seen the film yet. I'm going to go ahead and see it by the time you listen to it, hopefully. So I can go ahead and on our Monday show, go ahead and break it down for you even more with Tyler Baker. And then again on Friday with my good friend Josh Peterson here. When it comes to Avengers Infinity War, as far as Thanos, does he come across as the biggest baddie of them all? We've seen some great villains on a couple of occasions. Like I said, Robert Redford is still the best villain to me. Red Skull with Hugo Weaving did a pretty good job as well. Obviously, Michael B. Jordan as Eric Killmonger was a tremendous villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Marvel villains as a whole, though, have been substandard on many occasions. Both you and I have talked over the past couple years. And in fact, as we did our Marvel Cinematic Universe breakdown on several episodes now over the past couple months, we've also talked about how disappointing on several occasions the Marvel villains are. Thanos has been someone who we've actually been seeing on glimpses of in end credit scenes and whatnot, and actually involved, intertwined in some small parts in previous Marvel films. Does he come across as the Marvel villain that you're so used to seeing in the comic books, and also a Marvel villain that we were hoping that we would get as far as a big all-time baddie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
You don't love him, you don't hate him, but he is very unstoppable. So he's terrifying and he thinks he's right, and that's kind of what makes a really bone-chilling villain. And he is, I don't know, there's tragedy in his past that drives him forward, and he's literally willing to sacrifice anything to get there, and that's what makes him so terrifying. And he has the ability, like he's with the Infinity Gauntlet and the stones, like he's in what's the word? Invulnerable. He can do whatever he wants, and that's what really makes you wonder, like, okay, what is going to happen to the Marvel universe next? Because this movie really is a game changer.
And he enlists the help of a certain Black Order as far as some evil henchmen in this film that get set to do a lot of damage. Well, in theory, a lot of damage in the film. One of the things that I've seen across reviews all over seems to be consistent is that even though the heroes that we've come to know get a lot of shine and get a lot of execution and also a lot of importance and a lot of time under the sun, Thanos gets a lot of time under the sun as well. But the Black Order seems to be left out a little bit as far as explanation and as far as their involvement in the film overall. Is this something you notice, or did you get the right amount of the Black Order, or did you end up after you watched the film wanting to know more about the Black Order?
Honestly, no, they're not really. They they don't really give a backstory on them. You just know that they've been serving Thanos for a long time, and you don't know whether it's out of fear or actual loyalty. But they're good foils, but there's not really enough curiosity pointed towards their characters to make you wonder about who they are, what happened to them, whatever. They don't really have a lot of depth, and with the exception of the girl and the old looking dude, they don't really get a lot of dialogue. So it's not when their part's over, you're not like, I wonder what kind of story that person has. It's not
Or
really.
when that part, I say when their time is not on screen as far as it's concerned,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, sorry, like, when they're done doing their thing, like, there's not really a lot of curiosity about what happened, what happened to make them want to be Thanos' servant. They get some dialogue and you're like, they're cool little set pieces, but, other than that, it's not really you don't really care. You don't come away from that wondering about them.
Would you have done more with them if you were directing it?
No, because again, like you want to make sure each of the main characters gets their time on screen, gets their story, and by doing like little backstories like that, it's hard to it makes everything else feel a lot more rushed. And this movie felt paced just right.
And that's something, like I said, going back to what we talked about previously, as far as it being on paper a 2 hour and 40-minute film. And by some measures, some people would say that might be too long of a film. I have actually watched films of that length and even more. And, there have been films, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and some of the movies there, as far as extended editions, and some other films that are 3 hours long that we felt are just the right amount as well. So I can totally understand it from that aspect. Well, I want to break it down a little bit more by asking you, maybe, it's not time for that final question yet, so I'll wait on that. I want to ask one more question, then we'll hit you up with the final thing I want to talk to you about. As that is, uh, what question is, were the effects, as far as seeing all the superheroes on screen, was the CGI, was the visual effects to your standard as far as from a Marvel film? Were they believable, and do they come across as something as spectacular as you have seen in the comic books?
Yeah, it was a visual feast. It all served a purpose, and it was not nearly as bad as what was in Venom. So as long as there's lower standards to see, you're gonna be grateful for stuff like that. But it no, it was just basically Iron Man stuff looks really cool, but like it's basically just a more perfected versions of what we've seen already. And we having the history that the MCU does, we know what to expect from this. We know that they're gonna put a lot of effort into their special effects, and there's a lot of care and craft and continuity that goes into it. So they did a really good job with that. I didn't There wasn't any I mean, you're probably referring to like the CG characters, and no, like they have enough depth and enough uh what is the I don't even know what word I'm looking for, but the skin colors look just real enough to make it seem like it belongs there, and that was a they did a really good job with that.
Okay. So, in your impression, that it really was a visual feast, it really was an overall great experience for you, and definitely something that you would recommend to audiences out there, whether or not they're a hardcore Marvel fan or whether they're just a casual audience member just wanting to check out the latest flick that's coming out and the big, the start basically of the summer movie season. So, you say it's something that you would recommend wholeheartedly, correct?
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a spectacle, and it's a fun movie, and it's a sad movie, and it's a there's not what it just goes, it starts it has its typical Marvel openings, and then it goes and goes and goes. So it's you don't it's an entertaining movie, and it's fun, and it doesn't require you to think about themes or anything. It's just giving you the culmination of the past 20 years of or 10 years of Marvel films. So it's good. I definitely recommend it. I don't know. I mean, I don't feel like I need to recommend it because this is going to get a lot of people going to see this movie. So, yeah, it's watch it.
Are you throwing a review up on our site?
Yeah, probably not till next week though.
Okay, fair enough.
I gotta be honest,
And
man. This is killing me to give you this to give you my thoughts without spoiling the movie. So I'm just like trying to put roadblocks up.
well, one spoiler I want you to go ahead and do. I'm just kidding when I say this, but it's kind of a spoiler. There is always an after credit scene when it comes to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, virtually almost. How many? I'm not asking you what type is in it. What's the content? How many after credit scenes are there? Just so everybody can get an idea, so they're not waiting extensively if it's like a mid credit scene or if it's actually the end credit scene as far as that's concerned.
There's one after credit scene and it is all the way at the end. So they do everyone's like getting expectant in the theater, moving to the edge of their seats when the you know, the produced credits were done. And then they're like, "Oh," when the thing actually started to flow up the screen. But no, it's at the very end and it's worth it. I think it is. It kind of bridges the gap to the next movie and at the same time gives you a little bit of insight into some characters that you have come to know and love. So I think it's worth staying to watch it.
All right. At least that was pretty good as far as a non-spoilers thing, but I just want to make sure everybody knows whether or not to stay for the end credits, if there is an end credits, and exactly how many are there. So it is coming at the end of the actual credits. So everybody out there has to stay tuned for that. All right, my friend. It's going to come down to this. The last question I'm going to give you as far as a spoiler-free Avengers Infinity War review. You and I have already broke down our thoughts on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They can read my thoughts on the Marvel Cinematic Universe on popculturecosmos.wordpress.com. And they know exactly my list from best to worst on that. And you've pretty much already, in no certain terms over the course of the 2 years we've been doing this, have also verbalized a best to worst list of your favorite to non-favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe films. Where does Avengers Infinity War lie on that list? And is it your all-time favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe film?
It's my second favorite so far because nothing's ever going to top Winter Soldier for me. So I put Infinity War right underneath Winter Soldier. It has everything that I loved about all the other movies in it. So I think that's what puts it so high on the list.
And well, actually, that leads into another question because I first came to know you, and first, we obviously met, kind of all got together as far as friends and colleagues as far as from the video game aspect. But one of the first things you wanted to show me was an article you wrote while you were still at National University along with me. And as far as a basically really great article that you wrote extensively on the Marvel Universe, but from a comic book standpoint. As someone who has been a comic book fan all of his life, someone who has enjoyed comic books for many years now. I'm sorry I had to tell you that, but it's many years now. What are your thoughts as far as seeing this come to life, as far as those type of epic battles, the storylines, and the things that you have seen for many years now come to fruition as far as on the big screen is concerned? Because I will tell you right now, I told my daughter today that this for me is one of the top 5 most exciting films for me that I've been so excited for. It's in the top 5 of anticipation for me. But I can't even express how even more excited you would be as far as that's concerned, because you are definitely a much bigger comic book fan than I. So share with us as we get ready to head on out your thoughts on just how important this is to you as a comic book fan.
I mean, honestly, the movie's still sinking in right now, but it was like all of the stuff that I've seen in the comic books, all the stuff where like the Avengers are teaming up with Spider-Man and Guardians and stuff like that, all the times that they've come together in the comic books and seeing what a spectacle that was, it was just like that. Like it was a very comic book movie, and for that, like, I am super grateful because they didn't try to make it something it's not, and they put characters together that mesh well together, and there's even, like, characters when they come together, you're like, you know that they have a history that they have not talked about on in the MCU yet, but it exists in the comic book, so it's kinda cool to see that, and you're like, "Oh, are they gonna hint at this and that?" It was really cool because, you know, back when Iron Man came out, I didn't think Iron Man was gonna do that well, just because it's like, you know, we had Spider-Man before and the CG and like Spider-Man got better over the years, but it's still questionable. So how are they gonna make that with an Iron Man movie? And then, you know, they had the whole call out to the Avengers, and like this is the beginning of the end game, and like it was a spectacle. It was everything that I wanted it to be and everything that I hoped it would be, and all the big set pieces from the comic books, they're able to bring to life without making it seem overwhelming or crowded or pointless. And it everything served a purpose, and the writing was really well done. The CG looked good. The acting was good. It was the fight scenes all made sense, and they were spectacles. They're you know, obviously you saw in the trailer where Thanos throws the planet, like that was cool. And there's that's you know, that's not even you're not even scratching the surface of all like the cool fight scenes in this movie. So yeah, I'm stoked, man. I was stoked. I'll probably have to see it again. My inner kid was just ecstatic during this movie, but you know, and I hope that it does the same for everybody else. It's they've always done a good job of capturing your imagination, and you know, I hope that this movie does that for people.
I hope it does for them as well. Any last? Oh, and so that pretty much concludes Josh's thoughts with his spoiler-free review. Well, hopefully it managed to avoid any spoilers out there for you of Avengers Infinity War. If you have thoughts on the movie itself, we'd love to hear from you. Just go ahead and share us your thoughts, popculturecosmos@yahoo.com. Also as well, Pop Culture Cosmos, Humanica Media, and Game Source on Facebook and Twitter as well. Josh will actually not be here for our Monday show. That's going to have Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Pater podcast in the hot seat. We're going to be talking about the NFL draft, what happened with Infinity War, and how did it end up doing as far as in worldwide over the weekend. We're also going to talk a lot more about The Walking Dead. I'm going to have an expert come on to next week's show. She is going to be talking to me on both the Monday and Friday episodes about The Walking Dead, about how season 8 ended, and also what the future may hold for the series itself. We're going to have that and a lot more. Just so excited to talk about it. Summer movie breakdown. We're going to be breaking down some of our favorite movies to watch out for as well, coming up next week. Just so excited for it. Josh, I'm going to miss you on Monday's show, but definitely going to have you back on the Friday show as always. But as we head on out, any last thoughts?
I finished God of War, so we will talk about that at a later date. But yeah, check out there's some reviews going to be going up here soon, so that'll be cool.
Absolutely. And I know Nintendo and Xbox also reported their numbers, but PlayStation 4 is still going strong here in the US. Contradictory a little bit to what I had said previously. They were kind of like on its downswing. Yeah, they're still on its downswing as far as overall what they were doing maybe 2-3 years ago, but they're still very strong. They still won the month of March and maybe even the month of April with God of War coming out. So definitely looking for some more great months from PlayStation 4, but also want to check in with Josh as well on the Friday episode and talk a little bit more about Nintendo's future, Xbox One, and so much more in the video game world because they all came out with their numbers recently. So definitely want to delve into that as well. So for Josh Peterson, this is Gerald Glassford. It's another beautiful day in paradise right here in the PCC Multiverse. We thank you for listening. And here's hoping you have yourself a great day.